A widower with 3 kids was turned away by every landlord in Millburn, Tennessee. Every single one. On the night he ran out of options, the daughter of the last woman who'd refused him found his children sleeping in a pickup truck in a November parking lot. What she did next would cost her mother something she'd spent 5 years building, and give her back something she'd spent 5 years trying to forget. The rejections came in different shapes. Polite, professional, apologetic. Sometimes the landlord looked him in the eye when they said no. Sometimes they looked at the children instead, did a quick count, and the answer was already forming behind their eyes before Russell Voss had finished the sentence. After 11 rejections in 9 days, he had stopped needing to hear the words to know what they meant. On the night of the 12th, a woman named Wren Callahan was driving home from a closing shift at the diner on Route 9, taking the back road through the east side of town the way she always did. She almost took the highway, but the highway had construction and she was tired and her feet hurt, so she took the back road and her headlights swept across the parking lot of the old Piggly Wiggly that had been shuttered since 2019 and never reopened. There was a truck parked there. A gray pickup, old model, one taillight brighter than the other. Windows fogged from the inside. Wren slowed, then stopped, then pulled over. The temperature outside was 34 degrees. She could see her breath even with the car heat on. She got out. Russell Voss was 41 years old, and he had been a good man his whole life. Not the kind of good that makes the news or earns a ceremony. The quiet kind. He showed up. He paid his bills on time. He built things with his hands and built them right, because he believed that work done wrong wasn't really work at all. Just a problem left for someone else. His wife, Dana, had died 11 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, from diagnosis to the end, was 6 weeks. 6 weeks, which is not enough time to prepare for anything, but is somehow exactly enough time to watch someone disappear in front of you in increments so small you keep thinking it can't possibly get worse, and then it does. Russell had 3 children. Theo was 13. He was the kind of 13 that looks 16 from the outside and feels 40 from the inside. Since Dana died, Theo had taken on things without being asked. He cooked dinner when Russell worked late. He got his siblings ready for school. He didn't complain, didn't ask for things, didn't give Russell any of the ordinary trouble of a 13-year-old boy, and that absence of trouble was the most heartbreaking thing Russell had ever witnessed, because it meant his son had already decided that his father was carrying too much to be asked for more. Gracie was 8. She had Dana's eyes and Dana's habit of tilting her head when she was thinking hard about something. She carried a gray cardigan everywhere. It had been Dana's, the one she wore on Sunday mornings making pancakes, sleeves too long, smelling less and less like her mother every week. Gracie knew this, which was why she kept it folded in her backpack instead of wearing it, trying to preserve whatever was left. Benji was 4. Benji still asked, sometimes, when Mama was coming home. Not every day anymore, but sometimes. Russell's answer had changed over 11 months from the truth to something softer, to something he could say without his voice breaking while buckling a car seat. He managed it now. Just barely. Russell had been a contractor. Residential work, framing, drywall, finish carpentry. He was good at it. He'd had steady work for 14 years, built a modest house in North Millburn with a yard and a porch and a kitchen Dana had loved. Then the medical debt came. Not all at once, the way a wall falls. The way a wall gets eaten by water, slowly, invisibly, until one morning you press your hand against it and it gives way. By the time Dana had been gone 6 months, Russell had sold the house to cover what the insurance hadn't. He moved the kids into a 2-bedroom rental. He found steady work. He was managing. Then the rental management company changed hands. New owners, 30 days, all units, no exceptions. Russell made a plan. He made lists. He told the kids in a calm voice that everything was going to be okay. He called every number he could find. He filled out applications at red lights and in parking lots after the kids were asleep in the back seat. 12 landlords in 9 days. The last one was a woman named Mona Callahan. Mona owned a hardware store on the east side of Millburn. Callahan's True Value, which had been there since her husband Gene opened it in 1988, and which had been hers alone since Gene died of a heart attack in 2015. She lived above it. She also owned the unit next door, a 2-bedroom she'd rented out over the years to quiet tenants, mostly older ones, mostly singles. Russell had found her number on a handwritten index card tacked to the bulletin board at the laundromat on Birch Street. 2 bedrooms. Reasonable rate. Call Mona. He called. She sounded direct, a little guarded, but not unfriendly. He told her everything: his income, his work history, the 3 kids. There was a pause that lasted about 4 seconds. Then she said, "Come by Thursday morning. I'll show you the place." Thursday morning. Russell dressed the kids carefully. Theo wore his good jacket. Gracie's hair was 2 neat braids. Benji had on the little button-down he'd worn to Dana's funeral, and then to church twice, and then to his preschool picture day. Getting too small for him now, collar a little stiff around the neck, but the cleanest thing they had. Mona opened the door to the hardware store. She was 62. Compact, gray-streaked hair, kept short and practical, the hands of a person who had spent decades lifting and sorting without ceremony. She looked at Russell, then past him. Her eyes moved across Theo, Gracie, Benji. 1, 2, 3. Something moved across her face like weather that had decided to stay. Not anger, not contempt. Something older and heavier than either. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have said this on the phone. The unit isn't suited for a family. I need someone quiet, no liability issues." Russell had heard this before. He had learned, over 11 rejections, that arguing did not help, that the no he kept receiving wasn't about noise or liability. It was about something older and harder that lived underneath those words, and you could not argue someone out of something they had never put into language themselves. "I understand," he said. "Thank you for your time." He turned back toward the truck. Gracie took Benji's hand without being asked. Theo walked in front, a step ahead and a step to the side, the geometry of a boy who had made himself responsible for the people behind him. Mona watched them go. She did not close the door immediately. She stood there longer than she should have. That night Russell parked in the lot of the old Piggly Wiggly. It was the 3rd night in a row. Quiet. Lit well enough that he could see if anyone approached. Close to Benji's preschool for morning pickup. He put the kids down in the back. Gracie had the sleeping bag. Benji had Russell's old flannel jacket wrapped around him. Theo had the wool blanket from the emergency kit in the truck bed, the one Russell's had carried for years and never imagined needing like this. "You okay?" Russell said. "Yeah," said Theo. The way he always said it now. Like a man who had said it so many times the word had stopped meaning anything except "I'm still here." Russell put his hand on the back of Theo's neck for a moment. His son was the exact age Russell had been when his own father lost his job, and they'd moved in with Russell's grandmother for a winter. He remembered that winter in specific detail: the cold of the car, the particular shame of needing somewhere to go. He had promised himself then, at 13, that he would never put a child through what he was living through right now. He sat in the front seat. He didn't sleep. He watched the rearview mirror and the orange glow of the highway in the distance. At some point, Benji coughed. That wet, rattling cough of a small child sleeping in cold air. Russell reached back, tucked the flannel tighter, sat back and stared at the dashboard, and didn't say anything because there was nothing to say that the moment didn't already know. He was still there when he heard a knock on the passenger window. Wren Callahan was 34. She'd come back to Millburn 3 years ago after her divorce, taken the diner job, stayed longer than she planned. She knocked twice, slow, not aggressive. She stepped back so he could see her face in the parking lot lights. Russell rolled the window down. She looked at him. She looked at the kids bundled in the dark. Benji coughed again. "How long?" she said. 3 days here, Russell said. 9 overall. Wren looked at Theo, who had opened his eyes and was watching her with the quiet stillness he brought to everything now. Measuring, not afraid. Just measuring. "Wait here," she said. She walked back to her car. Russell watched her make a phone call, short, her body language shifting through something that looked like persuasion. Then she came back. "My mother has a spare room," she said. "You're coming with me." Russell opened his mouth. "Your kids are cold," she said. "Don't." Mona Callahan was in her kitchen when they came through the door. She'd turned the lights on, put the kettle on the stove, and stood with her arms crossed. When Russell walked in behind her daughter with 3 children, the smallest one asleep on his shoulder, she said nothing. Her face was a room with the curtains drawn. "Mona," Wren said, "this is Russell Voss, and these are his kids." Mona looked at Russell. Russell looked back. With the specific posture of a man who knows he is somewhere he wasn't expected, and is trying to take up as little space as possible while still standing upright. "Spare rooms down the hall," Mona said. She turned back to the stove. The first morning, Russell was up before Mona. By the time she came downstairs, her kitchen had been cleaned, not just rinsed. The counters wiped down with something that smelled faintly of vinegar, the dish rack emptied. Dishes stacked neatly to one side because he didn't know where they went, and he wasn't going to presume. The trash tied and set by the back door. Mona stood in the doorway, looked at the kitchen, said nothing. The second morning, same thing. On the third day, she was coming down the back steps from the storage area above the hardware store when she noticed the landing step. The third one. It had been soft for 2 years, the wood spongy underneath, the kind of thing you learn to step around until one day you don't, and you go through it. She'd been meaning to fix it since last spring. It was fixed. The wood was new, cut clean, sanded smooth, done in the early morning using a piece of scrap lumber from the storeroom. Russell had noticed it the first night he'd gone down to retrieve Benji's jacket and hadn't said a word about it. Mona pressed her foot against the step, solid. She went inside. She didn't say anything. But at dinner that evening, she served the children first without being asked, and when Benji knocked over his cup of water, she handed him the dish towel before the water had even reached the table's edge. The automatic reflex of a woman who had once known what it meant to move fast for small hands. On the 4th evening, Benji came in from the narrow strip of gravel behind the store where he'd been playing, the complete investment of a 4-year-old who has decided a space is interesting. He walked up to where Mona was sitting in the living room. He opened his fist. A piece of quartz, white with a vein of gray, smooth on one side, catching the lamplight in a way that made it look lit from within. "I found it," he said. "It's the shiniest one." Mona looked at the rock, then at the boy, who was watching her with his mother's eyes, which Russell had mentioned once in passing, and which Mona had not forgotten because she had the habit of noticing things she could not make herself stop noticing. "It's the shiniest one I've ever seen," Mona said. Benji set it on the end table beside her chair like a formal offering. Then he went back outside. Mona picked up the rock, held it, set it down, picked up her book, did not read it for a long time. On the 5th day, she came around the corner into the hallway and found Gracie standing in front of the closed door at the far end. Not touching it. Just close, her hand nearly on the handle, her forehead almost against the wood. Then Gracie heard Mona's footstep and stepped back quickly, and her face went carefully neutral the way children's faces do when they've been caught, wanting something they weren't sure they were allowed to want. "Sorry," Gracie said. "I wasn't going to go in." "It's okay," Mona said. Gracie went back to the spare room. Mona stood in the hallway looking at the closed door. That room had been Kevin's, her son. She hadn't opened it in 4 years, 2 months, and a number of days she sometimes counted and sometimes couldn't make herself count. Kevin had died at 31. Overdose, and the part Mona still could not say out loud to anyone was not that she hadn't seen it coming. It was that she had. She had seen the signs for 2 years and she had believed him every time he said he had it handled, because she'd needed to believe him. Because the real thing underneath was that her son was drowning and she was standing on the bank, unable to reach him, and eventually she had done the thing she knew, even as she was doing it, was wrong. She had pulled back. She had issued ultimatums. She had decided that love alone wasn't enough if he wasn't willing to meet her halfway. Kevin had left behind 2 children, a boy named Adrian, 7 now, a girl named Nell, 4. Their mother had moved to Nashville 2 years before Kevin died. She did not let Mona see them. Mona understood why. She had failed Kevin, and in failing him she had failed them too, and that was a sentence she was still serving. When Mona turned away Russell Voss and his 3 children, it was not about liability. It was about a man who still had time to get it right. And how hard it was to look at that without seeing Kevin at 30. Before, when there was still time, and the shape of every way she had not been what he needed. She had built walls. Around the hardware store, around the rental, around the room at the end of the hall. Load-bearing walls. The kind that keep the structure standing. Standing in the hallway now, she understood in a way she was not yet ready to say aloud that the walls had not protected anything. They had only made the inside smaller. Russell cried on the 6th night. In the bathroom, tap running, sitting on the edge of the tub at 1:15 in the morning, because Benji had asked at bedtime, quietly and almost to himself, the way he asked when he'd been carrying it all day. Is Mama coming back in a different way? Like in a different body? Russell had held it together through the answer, through the tucking in, through Theo's eyes across the hallway, Theo who had heard everything, whose face had done the thing it did now, the closing, the setting of the jaw, the going somewhere inside himself that his father couldn't follow. He sat on the edge of the tub and he cried the way men cry when they've been not crying. For so long the body must take it back in installments. Short, held in the chest as long as possible. He cried for Dana, the full weight of her, which he never let himself carry all at once because there were children in the next room, and the children came first, always. But at 1:15 a.m., in a stranger's bathroom, for a few minutes, he let it be as heavy as it actually was. He didn't know Mona was in the kitchen. She heard the water running a long time. She did not go knock on the door. She understood that some grief is not meant to be witnessed, and the most respectful thing she could do for a man crying in her bathroom at 1 a.m. was to let him believe no one knew. She made tea, 2 cups, left one on the kitchen table. When Russell came out and saw it, he stopped. He looked at the cup, looked around the empty kitchen, sat down, drank it slowly. In the hallway, Mona stood in the dark, with her own cup in both hands, back against the wall. She thought about Kevin. She thought about Adrian and Nell. She thought about what it means to be too late, and whether there is a version of too late that still has something left in it. On the 7th morning, Russell was loading tools into his truck for a framing job 2 miles north when Mona came to the back door. She stood there for a moment. He waited. The unit next to the store, she said. The rate I told you on the phone. It stands. Russell turned around slowly. I'm not doing you a favor, she said, and her voice had the quality of someone saying something they mean more than they sound like they mean. You're a carpenter. I have dry rot in the back storeroom and a section of floor in aisle 3 I've been stepping around for 6 months. I need the work done. You can take the cost off the first 2 months' rent. Russell looked at her. He didn't respond immediately. Not because he was hesitating. Because he had learned over the past year the difference between things that needed words and things that needed something quieter. Thank you, Mona, he said. She nodded, went back inside. They moved in on a Saturday. They didn't have much. Ren came and helped carry boxes. Mona organized the kitchen without being asked, lower shelves for the things small hands would need to reach, a thing she did without naming and without ceremony. Theo went into the bedroom he'd share with Benji and stood very still in the middle of it. Then he walked to the wall and pressed his palm flat against it. The way you test something you're not certain is real. He turned to Russell. Is this ours? Not asking whether they'd keep it forever. Just asking whether, for a real and measurable amount of time, this wall would be here when he pressed his hand against it. Yeah, Russell said. His jaw was tight. His eyes were full of something he was not going to let fall in front of his son. This is ours. Theo nodded once. He went to his side of the room and began unpacking slowly, folding everything with care. The way you treat something you're trying to make last. That same afternoon, Gracie asked if she could put her mother's cardigan in the closet instead of her backpack. It'll still be there, Russell told her. She thought about it for a long time. Then she opened the closet, folded it carefully on the shelf, and closed the door. She stood in front of the closed door for a moment, testing whether she could live with something precious out of arm's reach. Then she went to go find Benji. Mona, who had come up to drop off extra hangers, saw it through the open doorway. The folding, the closed door. The girl standing in front of it, learning to trust a space to hold something she couldn't afford to lose. She went home. She walked to the end of her own hallway. She stood in front of Kevin's door, the way she had been standing in front of it for 4 years. She opened it. The room smelled like dust and old laundry, and the specific fading smell of her son. She stood in the doorway without going in. She looked at the room for a long time. Then she took out her phone. She scrolled to a number she had not called in 2 years. She dialed before she could stop herself. Voicemail. She left a message, short. Her voice was steady, which surprised her. This is Mona, Kevin's mother. I know this is past due, and I know you don't owe me anything. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for all of it. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I'll keep being here. That's all. She hung up. She stood in the doorway another moment. Then she left the door open for the first time in 4 years and went back to the kitchen. On Saturday mornings, Mona let Theo come down to the hardware store before opening. It started because he'd asked if he could watch her take inventory, the way kids ask about something when they're already building toward it. She said yes. The second week, he started helping without being asked, marking low items on the clipboard with neat numerals because he'd watched her do it once and understood the system. The third week, she handed him the clipboard at the start. He was 13. He stood at the end of an aisle at 7:30 on a Saturday morning, completely serious, doing the work like it mattered. Because to him it did. Because doing work that mattered was the only way Theo Voss knew how to say that he was still here and still trying. Mona watched him from the office doorway. She thought about Kevin. She thought about Theo. She thought about the 27 different ways she could have done things differently. She didn't let herself stay there long. The point of could have is limited. The point of can still is not. Come look at this, she called to him. I'll show you how the order form works. Benji stopped calling her Miss Callahan on the third week. He called her Miss Mo for 5 days, then just Mo. Mona did not correct him. When Benji got a small cold in November, just the ordinary illness of a 4-year-old in November, Mona came upstairs with soup. The same chicken noodle she had made every winter for Kevin. Simple, broth heavy, the kind that works because it isn't trying to do too much. Benji was on the couch under a blanket. He looked at the soup, then at Mona. Mo, he said, with the authority of a 4-year-old making an important declaration, you can sit here. He moved his feet to make room. Mona sat. Benji ate half the soup and fell asleep with his head against her arm. Mona sat very still. Outside the window, the November sky went from gray to deeper gray to the blue that comes just before dark. She did not move for a long time. She held a boy who was not her grandson and felt, in the particular weight of him, the particular warmth of a small person who has decided you are safe. Something that had been missing from her chest for 4 years slot, carefully back into place. Russell came in from work at 5:30 and stopped in the living room doorway. He looked at his son asleep against Mona's arm. He looked at Mona's face, which was doing something complicated. He didn't say anything, He went to the kitchen and put the kettle on, and he brought out 2 cups, and he set one on the end table beside her, next to the quartz rock, which was still there. 2 months later, Kevin's ex-wife called back. Not to forgive, exactly, not yet, but to say that Adrian had been asking about his grandmother, that he'd been asking long enough that the question needed an answer. She said she wasn't ready for a visit, maybe someday. Mona said that was enough. She meant it. In the spring, Russell finished the repairs in the hardware store. The back storeroom was solid. The floor in aisle 3 didn't shift. He'd found the dry rot and replaced it, checked every adjacent section by hand, because he did not believe in fixing only what you could see. He was still there in the fall. Upstairs. Enough work now that the fear had changed shape from will we have a place to sleep to will we have enough saved by next year, which is not the same fear and does not live the same way in the body. Gracie opened the closet every morning and sometimes wore her mother's cardigan and sometimes didn't. The difference was that she could choose. Theo turned 14 and was taller and quieter and still watchful, but the watching had changed. It wasn't calculating exits anymore. It was just paying attention. The paying attention of a boy who had decided the place he was in was worth understanding. Mona did not have her grandchildren yet, but she had a number she could call. She had a voicemail returned. She had a someday being moved slowly in the right direction by careful, consistent hands. Russell Voss lost his wife, his house, and 12 landlords in 9 days. He ran out of options in a parking lot at 34 degrees with 3 sleeping children and a piece of quartz Benji had been carrying since morning, waiting for whoever was kind enough to deserve it. Mona Callahan lost her son, her grandchildren, and the years of mornings in a kitchen that used to have children in it. She had built walls around the hardware store, around the rental units, around the room at the end of the hall. Good, solid, load-bearing walls. The kind that keep a structure from coming down. What she had not understood, in all the years of building them, was that the same walls that kept the damage out also so kept the light out, and that a house with no light in it is not a protected house. It is just a dark one. Russell Voss didn't need a miracle. He needed one door to stay open long enough for him to walk through it. And a woman who had spent 5 years behind closed doors needed a reason to open them. A piece of quartz, a fixed porch step, a 4-year-old who moved his feet to make room on the couch. It doesn't take much. It only takes someone on the other side of the door deciding that what's out there matters more than what they've been protecting themselves from.